Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy, introducing the new Trader Support Service. The UK has left the EU, and the transition period after EU exit comes to an end on the 31st of December 2020. The process of moving goods into and out of Northern Ireland will change as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol. On this webinar, you will hear how the free-to-use Trader Support Service will support traders who move goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland through these changes. During the course of the next 45 minutes, please use the GoToWebinar dashboard to post your questions. We will answer as many of these as we can throughout the session. Before we go into the presentation, we'd like to run a quick straw poll, which I shall launch now. The first poll is a simple one. How many of our listeners here today have signed up for the Trader Support Service already? Yes, no, but I'm thinking about it, or no. While that is ongoing, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today in Kevin Shakespeare. Hi Kevin, how's it going where you are today?
Yeah, I'm good, Will. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody.
Great to have you here, Kevin. Kevin manages the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy's specialist customs training resources and courses. He has developed a wide range of qualifications in partnership with trade and industry previously, including with Invest Northern Ireland, Scottish Enterprise, UK Export Finance, Saudi Export Development Authority, and many, many others. And before I hand over to Kevin, I will, in a few seconds, close that poll. Give you just a couple more seconds. We close it now. And here are the results. So 54% of you already have signed up for the Trader Support Service, 22% of you thinking about it, and 24%, well, let's see how today's webinar goes. So Kevin, any thoughts on that poll?
First of all, thank you to everyone who's completed the poll and the information. It's good, obviously, that 54% have signed up. Clearly, if you do have GBNI trade, we are very, very keen that you actually sign up for information and register on the trader registration portal. So that allows you to receive information notifications, which will be very important for your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to you for the presentation. Over to you, Kev.
Thank you again, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, it's a pleasure to be able to present to you. There's just information about myself, but if we have the next slide, please. So just by way of reflection, so the Northern Ireland Protocol will take effect at the end of the transition period. So at the end of the transition period, after 31st December 2020, the process of moving goods in and out of Northern Ireland will change as a result of Northern Ireland Protocol. And we'll look at some of those aspects today. But an important thing to note is the government has established this free-to-use trader support service to support businesses. I'll be talking about that during the course of today and the specific areas of support provided or available from the trader support service. If we have a next slide, please. So when we think about trader, I think we need to think of it about every business is different. Each business circumstance is different. And what we try to do on this slide is just give some different examples of goods movement. So that can be businesses based in Northern Ireland that purchase goods from Great Britain. So that, for example, could be a construction company in Derry buying tools from a supplier based in Cardiff. And again, it's clear to say that there is a buyer, a B2B, business-to-business transaction there. It could be businesses based in Great Britain that sell goods to customers in Northern Ireland. So that, for example, could be a cider brewery or brewery that sells to bars and restaurants across the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, including Belfast. It could be businesses that operate across the UK, so they're transferring goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So the example on screen is a computing company with outlets across the UK, which organises supply movements between their stores. It could be carriers that transport goods between GB&I, so carriers in its wider sense, and different elements of the whole carrier community, which is absolutely vital. So that could be a private haulier who typically serves a number of clients across the UK in, say, the construction industry. It could be freight forwarders that facilitate transportation between movements between GB and NI traders. So freight forwarder organising the shipment on behalf of individuals and businesses, corporations. If we have a next slide, please. So what we're going to do today is look at what's changing and what support is available and what do I need to do now. So if we have a next slide, please. So what we're going to do is during the next few slides is look at different trade routes and look at some of the possible changes after the end of the transition period. So that will cover routes such as Great Britain to Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland to Great Britain, Northern Ireland to and from Ireland, and Northern Ireland to and from the rest of the world, and also the concept of transit routes as well. So we're going to look at each of these 5 routes individually. So we have a next slide, please. So first of all, route 1, goods moved from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will be subject to new declarations. So that requires both import declarations and safety and security declarations will apply to goods sent from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And that declaration, that inbound declaration and entry safety and security declaration will apply for goods entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain. It is possible that tariffs may need to be paid on goods deemed at risk, although I would stress that is subject to ongoing negotiations. And when we mean at risk, we mean at risk of moving to Ireland and the European Union. But I would stress that is subject to ongoing negotiations. And for businesses, one of the key aspects is to try and make sure that you have supply chain traceability. So if goods are staying in Northern Ireland, do you have that traceability that is actually the case? And then we have aspects around food and agricultural products, so are classified as sanitary and phytosanitary, which may be subject to health certification and specified processes. So those are some of the changes to consider, and we'll be talking again about that more in future slides. If we have a next slide, please. So now let's consider this from the point of view of goods moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. So broadly, it should take place as it does now, with no additional processes, no additional paperwork documentation, and no additional restrictions. There will, however, be export declarations, or declarations is probably a better way of putting it, in extremely limited circumstances. So for goods which are moving subject to international obligations, an example that is frequently used is goods around CITES, the movement of around endangered species, and also goods moving under duty suspension. So again, in general terms, with those exceptions, goods moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, no additional processes, documentation or restrictions. If we have a next slide, please. So now let's look at trading goods moving between Northern Ireland and Ireland and the rest and the European Union. So that will continue. There'll be no changes, no new documentation, no tariffs, and no regulatory checks. So that's goods moving from Northern Ireland and Ireland, or goods moving from Northern Ireland to the rest of the European Union. It is fair to say that businesses in Northern Ireland must ensure they continue to meet EU regulatory standards. So an example of that would be the CE marking in the European Union. If we have a next slide, please. And now let's think of it in the context of trading between Northern Ireland and non-EU countries. And that will continue broadly as it today. Northern Ireland businesses will benefit from UK free trade agreements. So tariffs may apply to imports in the same way as they do today for goods moving between Northern Ireland and non-EU countries. And in that instance, for imports, from non-EU countries, the UK tariff regime will apply, unless the goods are considered at risk of moving to the European Union, in which case the EU Common External Tariff will apply. So again, that's in the context of goods moving between Northern Ireland and non-EU countries. So currently we classify as rest of the world. If we have a next slide, please. Now, this is quite a detailed slide, so let's consider transit procedures, which could be relevant for some movements. So traders can voluntarily make use of transit procedures to move goods. So transit would continue to operate in the normal way, and there may be some businesses on the call that are familiar with transit, and there may be others to which transit is a new concept. And I would stress, as a lot of things, that the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy are providing support and information. So transit will continue to operate in a normal way in these circumstances, and could be discharged at authorised locations or government offices in Northern Ireland. Specific discussions are ongoing as to transit requirements for goods moving from Europe, continental Europe, to the island of Ireland via the GB land bridge. So transit can be used to move goods from GB to Northern Ireland via Ireland. So, for example, Holyhead to Dublin to Northern Ireland. Transit declarations would apply, and some traders would need to use sealed trucks. It is fair to say that for food, agriculture, or any goods requiring SPS sanitary and phytosanitary checks that are moved on this route, they would require SPS checks in Ireland before proceeding to Northern Ireland. So administrative processes and transit declarations may apply to goods moved on other transit routes. And again, look out for further courses on lots of elements that we're talking about today, including transit.
Great, thank you, Kevin. We'll take a quick break now, as we've had absolutely loads of questions come in already. One is from a business in Bristol, who asks, if a free trade agreement between the EU and the UK results in no tariffs on goods moving from GB to NI, will entry declarations still be required?
So thank you very much. It's a good question, and if there is a free trade agreement between the UK and the European Union, just to be clear, there would still require to be that inbound declaration on goods entering Northern Ireland and the entry safety and security declaration. So those declarations will still be required. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So that is, the declarations will still be required for that goods movement. Another question is one from Portrush, a business in Portrush, who asks whether after the transition period ends, will firms be able to benefit from both EU and UK free trade agreements with the rest of the world? So that's Northern Irish firms.
Okay, no, thank you. Again, it's a very fair question. So just to confirm that Northern Ireland businesses will be a part of the UK free trade agreements, not the EU, but the UK. So goods moving from the rest of the world to Northern Ireland will apply under, and Northern Ireland to the rest of the world will apply under UK trade agreements. If clearly goods are moving to Northern Ireland and then are deemed to be at risk of moving to Ireland, continental Europe, then it will be EU tariffs that would apply in that circumstance. But for goods that move from the rest of the world to Northern Ireland, it will be the UK tariff and applicable UK free trade agreements that will apply. But again, thank you, a very good question.
Thank you. So that's the UK trade deals will apply for Northern Irish firms for rest of world trade unless in transit. Well, there's a risk of transit into the EU. And where can people find out more information about those potential UK trade deals or the UK tariff, Kevin?
Yeah, so with respect to the UK tariffs, the UK has announced a global import tariff. So there is information on gov.uk around the UK global import tariff, and you can check what the UK global import tariff is linked to your product, your commodity code, and we have provided information in our introduction to customs around commodity codes and what they are. So you can establish it from there, but we'll be providing further training to support businesses as well. With regard to UK free trade agreements, again on gov.uk you have a list of the UK trade agreements that have been negotiated, and also the ones currently under negotiation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Just to give you a bit of a breather and to ask another question to our audience today, I'm going to launch another poll. So this time, another simple one. Do you currently move goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland? And while people are answering that poll, just a reminder that you can keep on asking us questions using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. Hopefully we'll come to many more of these questions at the end of today's session. And if not, we'll try to cover these questions in our future content. So I'll just give people a few more seconds to answer that poll. Great stuff. So if I give 5 more seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And to share the results, so 80% currently do move goods from Great Britain to NI, or Northern Ireland. 20% do not at the moment. Kevin, is that about what you'd expect? Is any surprises there?
Yeah, it's always difficult to know what percentages will apply. It's a high percentage which represents clearly a good level of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which is a good thing as well. So that's sort of probably reflective of what we're looking for, and I hope for that 80% what we're delivering today will provide information in addition to the introduction to customs and the other guides that are being produced as well to support businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everyone as well for answering that poll. Anyway, for the next part of the presentation, over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much indeed. So what we're going to do now is we've talked so far in terms of what's changing or what's not changing. What we're going to do now is look at support available as part of the Trader Support Service free to use service. And what we want to really establish and differentiate here is the core Trader Support GB to NI solution, as opposed to the established intermediary market that's already in place and serviced by some great companies in the wider intermediary market, including the carriers, the freight forwarders, the hauliers, the brokers and the agents, which is an established market very much in place. So very much want to distinguish, if you like, between the core TSS GB to NI solution as opposed to the established marketplace that's already functioning today. So if we have the next slide, please. So how will the different routes be served? So what we've done here again is come up with some example transport movements, but I would stress that it's very much about yourself, what your business does and the circumstances of your business. So if we think in context of Great Britain to Northern Ireland and the different routes, a construction company based in Northern Ireland purchasing tools from a supplier in Wales, could the Trader Support Service apply? So the answer in that instance, Great Britain to Northern Ireland trade, the TSS Digital First Service can provide support for declaration submission. Now, we would stress, as we stressed in our introduction to customs, clearly the need to communicate between the Northern Ireland buyer and the GB supplier, in this case in Wales, is very, very important. And in a lot of cases, the role of the freight forwarder, the haulier, and the wider intermediary community will be very, very important in that respect there. So liaison, stakeholder engagement of all parties. But in summary, for Great Britain to Northern Ireland, the TSS digital service can provide support for declaration submission, as it's a new requirement for that inbound declaration, import declaration, and that entry safety and security declaration. So in the case of Northern Ireland to and from the rest of the world, the example, an art dealership based in Northern Ireland buying and selling paintings from clients in the United States of America. There is an existing and established intermediary marketplace to support traders. So that existing intermediary market already exists. So if we have a transit here from Great Britain to Northern Ireland via Ireland, a clothing brand, the example, that buys materials from Great Britain, but the goods movement is via Dublin. So for example, Holyhead to Dublin to Northern Ireland. The TSS service can support traders with transit documentation. Then we have transit other routes, a bike supplier that transfers products purchased from China from an external temporary storage facility in Great Britain to Northern Ireland. There is an existing intermediary market in place to support traders. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. If we have the next slide, please. So in terms of what support is available, so first of all, for routes served by established intermediary markets. So we have the next slide, please. Thank you. So intermediaries will continue to help and support businesses to import and export their goods by ensuring the necessary customs documentation has been completed. There's an established intermediary market which continues in that respect. Traders can learn about intermediaries from the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy, and they can also find intermediaries through gov.uk as well. The TSS will provide information for traders on other routes or with more complex processes, but the stress in here, information, not the establishment of processes where the established intermediary market is already in place. So TSS will provide information for traders on other routes or where there's more complex processes. So for example, the process around movement of goods requiring health certification for SPS purposes and trade between Northern Ireland and non-EU countries. But it's more about the information, not the actual doing of it. If we have a next slide, please. So it's very important to indicate here that a TSS complements the established and important intermediary market. But the role of the TSS here is to provide educational information to traders and intermediaries, and very much directing traders towards the intermediary market on routes where there is an established intermediary market, so rest of the world to Northern Ireland. The TSS will offer declarations for goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So it will provide education guidance on customs obligations, particularly for traders with limited experience of customs procedures. And the TSS will facilitate declaration submission with a digital service. But the TSS will direct traders towards intermediary markets when their requirements go beyond the TSS offering. And it's also, I think, important to mention that as smaller traders build experience of customs procedures and processes, they may engage intermediaries to leverage the emerging opportunities for international trade. So it's very important to mention there that for smaller traders to engage intermediaries if there are opportunities for new and further international trade. If we have a next slide, please. So now let's talk about what support is available through the core TSS GB to NI solution. If we have a next slide, please. So again, to confirm, TSS will offer education and support to help traders understand and prepare for the coming changes. So education and advice. TSS will provide a digital platform to satisfy the administrative procedures which we've talked about today for goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And that will be on using data provided by the traders, or perhaps more particularly by the intermediary market and the forwarders, hauliers, for example, carrying goods on behalf of the traders. And the TSS will provide contact center support to help traders with issue resolution on the new processes. So those are the three elements of what the TSS can and will provide by way of support to traders. The TSS, however, will not provide a personalized service to individual traders, which are typically offered through customs brokerages and intermediaries. And the TSS will not replace services offered by the existing intermediary market. If we have a next slide, please. So let's just consider this a bit further. Again, to reinforce, what are the key GBNI declarations we've talked about? We've referred to it earlier in the context of for safety and security declaration. So who's responsible for making that safety and security declaration? So thinking about it in terms of the carrier community in its widest sense, so hauliers, for example. And how and when does it get lodged? So in terms of the shipment data provided by the carrier, the haulier, is used to generate the declaration before the goods move. So again, the liaison and the communications where used between the trader support service and the carrier community becomes very important. If we think about it in terms of inbound declarations made by forwarders, made by intermediaries, customs brokers and agents, possibly by senders or receivers, but probably the carrier, the wider intermediary market is very, very important in this respect. The import declaration. So in terms of the requirements, simplified frontier declaration with basic shipment information lodged before goods moved. So very much in a number of cases looking at simplified frontier declarations. And then after delivery of goods, the supplementary declaration is submitted. So in further learning, we'll training support materials, we'll be providing information in terms of the shipment information, the data requirements. So TSS will support traders with these declaration processes, but in a high number of cases, it could very much be the wider carrier community that the engagement and interaction. However, it's very, very important that traders and carriers, intermediaries sign up to the trader registration portal so that you can first of all receive further information, but that we can work together to make the shipment data and use of TSS the most effective possible. It is noted that there will be a limited number of traders and goods, so for example, controlled goods, including excise goods, where traders will need to provide additional data before goods movement that will require a full declaration. So again, if you are involved as a trader in controlled goods, including excise goods, if you are a carrier and intermediary, please sign up to the trader registration portal. If we have a next slide, please. So what do I do now then? So we've just to summarize, we've talked about the changes and what will change, what will not change. We've looked at examples of trade movements. We've talked about what the TSS will support, and we've talked very much about where the existing intermediary market is in place and functioning well. But now let's look, what do I have to do now? If we have the next slide, please. So businesses should register, and I've talked about this a lot, and now you've got the slide on screen, for the trader support service. So register your information on the trader registration portal by going to tradersupportservice.co.uk. Sign up to the TSS training courses. So the introduction to customs and GB2NI trade are available now. Clearly, businesses should apply for an EORI number if you don't have one already. The introduction to customs course can provide more details. And if you are a non-VAT registered business on the call, you still should apply for an EORI number. So look at the information on the introduction to customs course, which provides details with regard to applying for an EORI number. If you're interested in the TSS GBNI digital solution, as they stay posted for further information and training. If there are other journeys, as we've talked about, find an intermediary or engage with your existing intermediaries to understand and apply the necessary processes as you would today. So thank you. If we have the next slide, which I believe is the final slide. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. That's a very good presentation there. If we could actually move back to the last slide, I think it might be useful for people just to have visibility of that link. But yeah, as we'll now move on to the questions. Just before we do, just out of interest, Kevin, kind of what other training courses will will be available through TSS?
Yeah, no, thank you. So we talked about the introduction to customs, GBNI trade. There'll also be training courses with respect to a guide, a step-by-step guide to customs declarations, and that will link to declarations made through the CDS, the new customs declaration service. There'll be training on NI procedures and documentation, and also training related to classification and commodity codes. There will also be training that is focused GBNI trade, but also focused on the wider carrier community as well. So very much noting the key role of the wider carrier community, the intermediary community. There'll also be training that's focused at that very important community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We've had a few people, I'll start with a few questions about TSS itself. We've had a few people who have already registered their interest in TSS, but are just wanting to know whether they need to register again for their TSS declaration solution. Do they need to, and how do they do so?
Yeah, so what we would do is encourage people to register through going to the site on screen, tradersupportservice.co.uk. It may be that you registered to the previous HMRC gov.uk site, but we just encourage you just to go back on and register on the tradersupportservice.uk, tradersupportservice.co.uk, because there are some information and data fields which will be quite useful to gather that information, so we can focus the information around what you're telling us. So if you could go on and register, even if you've previously done it on the government site as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. A fair few people have asked, when will the TSS service actually go live, and when will detailed information and data requirements become available?
Yeah, really good question. So, I mean, there's sort of a couple of ways of looking at this. In terms of live, we're looking potentially, and please look out for further updates for the 21st of December in terms, if you like, the live environment for TSS, bearing in mind, obviously, that the procedures are not changing until the 1st of January. The contact center elements will be around about very early November, probably the 2nd of November, in terms of having that contact center inbound support provided. But I would stress we're already providing the training. Look out for further training. The further training will provide information on data sets. So I know some will be very keen, for example, in the carrier community, to understand what data sets, what shipment information is required. So further information will follow in that respect, heavily linked to the requirements for safety and the entry safety and security declaration. So look out for further training, look out for further information and guidance. We will definitely be providing it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the 21st December is the date to look out for the service itself, but there will be aspects of the contact center coming out before then. You've mentioned training. A few people have asked where they can find more information about the training available.
Yeah, so again, if you go on tradersupportservice.co.uk, there is a link there to the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy. So if you go on that site, you'll also see, as well as the registration, the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy as well. And if you click on that link, you'll see the information, the training courses already available, the guides which are available, and with more coming on stream to provide support. So if you go to this important site to register, but also look at the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy as well.
Thank you, Kevin. But a few people move on to some general trade questions, and there's been absolutely loads of questions in, so sorry if we don't get to everyone's today. But we've had a few people asking around kind of what dictates who is legally responsible for the import declaration, whether it's the importer or supplier. And a few people have also asked around how different uses of Incoterms affect that. So I'm just wondering if you could cover that whole topic a little bit quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'll definitely answer the question, and also in the further training we'll provide, we will be very much covering Incoterms within that, and Incoterms in the context of GB to NI trade. So in terms of responsibility for the declaration, ultimately that will depend on the Incoterms used. So clearly there are 11 Incoterms, and there are some of them applicable to certain modes of transport, like sea and air, for example, or especially sea specifically. So the Incoterms need to be discussed. So between the supplier or the buyer and the seller. In a lot of cases, it could be that the buyer needs to receive the goods, and the supplier wants to get paid for their goods, especially, I guess, in more local trade there over shorter distances. So if, for example, DDP, delivered duty paid, probably a more relevant one is delivered paid, is applied, the responsibility will be for the GB supplier to make the declaration. But clearly, in a large number of cases, we would expect them to engage with the freight forwarder, the intermediary, the customs broker agent, with regard to goods movement and the requirement for the declaration. And clearly the haulier, the carrier, for the entry, safety and security declaration, which again shows the importance of the carrier community, the intermediaries in this whole process. Goods have to move as they do today, and freight forwarders play an absolutely fundamental role, hauliers in that, and that doesn't change. Clearly there are other Incoterms that can apply, but it really is down to the trade negotiation in that respect. And on some occasions, larger businesses selling to smaller businesses will want to potentially take more control of the trade transaction because they want to make sure the goods arrive on time and they get paid. So DDP could apply in those circumstances. But again, look out for the further training, which will also cover Incoterms, and we also cover it within GBNI trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. A few people asking questions who are moving sanitary or phytosanitary types of goods. So this is one from a firm in Norfolk who moves perishable goods to Northern Ireland, and they're saying they can't tolerate any delays in transit. How would they ensure uninterrupted transit happens after transition, and will there be any support from TSS in this?
Yeah, I think again it's fair to say that TSS will be providing educational and awareness support. So TSS will not be, if you like, providing health certificates or anything like that. But what TSS will be doing is creating awareness of what's required. And we appreciate a number of businesses may be aware, perhaps larger businesses, of established processes if you're moving the goods to the rest of the world currently. So in that circumstances, there would be a requirement for health certificates. Veterinary health certificates would be required. And there would need to be import or inbound pre-notification in Northern Ireland as well. So there's a number of requirements there, and the TSS will be providing training support and awareness on those requirements. But again, a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everyone again for the questions coming through. Some really good stuff coming through. So I'll try to do a couple more. Just to bring it back to TSS, a company based in Republic of Ireland, but they have a branch in Northern Ireland, and they're asking can they use DSS?
Yeah, it's a good question there. So ultimately, if there is a business that trades in Northern Ireland that's receiving goods from GB to NI, then they should register on the Trader Support Service if they are receiving goods in Northern Ireland. That's very much the key point there, because it's important to recognise businesses where there is trade between GB and NI. So if that is the case, you should register on at tradersupportservice.uk. Yes.
Thank you, Kevin. A couple of questions just really on some of the customs essentials, really, which people may need to know. So this is a question from a company in Newcastle who asks, where can we find out the commodity codes for our products?
Okay, yeah, it's again a good question, and stress we will be providing further information. But in terms of commodity codes, I think the best thing for any business is to consider the nature of the product they've got first of all, even before they go looking for the commodity code. So what is the product they're moving, they're producing? What are some of the essential features of the product? And there is a information that you can try and work out what your commodity code is based on trade checkers. If you go to our Introduction to Customs course that we've provided, and we've held a number of sessions of that already, we provide details there of where you can obtain information on the commodity codes. Clearly, commodity codes are essential. So for some goods, that there is, depending on the nature of, for example, the ingredients, the component parts of a product, they can vary in terms of which commodity code is used. It's important in any trade to get the commodity code correct. So refer to Introduction to Customs, look at the sites where you can check, but also refer to what is in your product and the component ingredients are within that. If you're still not sure, you can apply for what is called a binding tariff information. Again, there are details of BTI on gov.uk. So we appreciate some products are more complex than others, but the important thing is, it's a really good question, is businesses should be clear on the commodity code that applies.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll do two more questions. We've had loads of people ask about at risk. So I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about, well, basically just recap what at risk is and what people will need to know about it. Yeah,
so I mean, we referred to it earlier as it is subject to ongoing negotiations between the UK and the European Union. So the Northern Ireland Protocol, as indicated, there will be a joint committee establishing what at risk means. But I would also want to stress that businesses should consider from the point of view is what is not at risk. So what goods are staying in Northern Ireland? What evidence do I have? Do I have supply chain traceability that those goods are staying in Northern Ireland? So think about it also what is not at risk. Clearly, if goods are moving from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, so for example, goods moving from, say, Cairn Ryan to Larne and then to Republic of Ireland, those goods are moving to the Republic of Ireland anyway. But think about it from what is not at risk there, and what information, what supply chain traceability do businesses have? Again, just to be clear, that at risk is not necessarily going to be a series of commodity codes. This is more about what is not at risk and how can I demonstrate supply chain traceability. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. 30 people have asked about whether there will be a recording of this webinar. There will be. We'll send a link to it afterwards with the relevant links and information which Kevin has mentioned. Kevin, just one last question before we head off. I mean, could you just quickly, as a recap, summarize what are the main services which DSS is going to be providing?
Yeah, so just by way of summary, there's the education and training support and the awareness around the requirements for declarations for traders, and also the wider training support for the wider carrier community. So there's that awareness aspect, and then in certain circumstances, as we've indicated in these slides, for GB to NI, is the availability, if required, to have a digital first service to make the GBNI inbound declaration into Northern Ireland in the entry safety and security declaration, but to stress the key role of working with the wider carrier community in that respect in terms of the data, the shipment data that's required to facilitate those requirements through the TSS Digital First service.
Thank you, Kevin. So there's the Digital First service, which will help on declarations. There's the education and the guidance, but there's also the contact centre as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But we've had absolutely loads of questions today. We've not been able to get through all of them, and loads of them are really good insights into the situations people will be facing over the coming months. So we'll definitely take those questions away and look at how we can cover them in our course content and in our how-to guides. But for now, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Kevin. I hope everyone has found this introductory webinar valuable. To pre-register for the Trader Support Service, please visit tradersupportservice.co.uk. And for more information about the educational courses and guides as they are released, please visit the Northern Ireland Customs Trade Academy website at nicustomstradeacademy.co.uk. But for now, we hope you found it useful, and we hope to speak to you soon. But for now, that's all from us. Goodbye.